Good morning and welcome to the first day of the 2024 Festival of Ideas. It's a very great pleasure to see so many people here, and I'm pleased that you've all been able to come and that you're all seated comfortably. So welcome again. My name's Sue Mendes. I'm from the University of York. It's my very great pleasure to welcome and introduce Adam Sharp, our speaker this morning. Adam's a writer who's originally from Manchester but has travelled the world, back now in Newcastle via Mexico, Nashville, the Channel Islands, the Canary Islands, and for those of you like me who got to Fulford via Osbaldwick, that's really a very, very big journey indeed. His first book was this one, The Correct Order of Biscuits, and other, to read the subtitle, meticulously assembled lists of extremely valuable nonsense. And that was published in 2020. But today he's going to talk about this second book, The Wheel is Spinning, but the Hamster is Dead. It's not a phrase that everybody knows, but it was one of my real favourite phrases, the wheel is spinning, but the hamster is dead. And I've no idea where it came from. Maybe you can enlighten me. So he's going to talk today for around 25 minutes, and then you have a challenge, which is why there's a piece of paper. And then I have a challenge, and Adam will continue his talk. I'm asked to warn you that you will need to be quite broad-minded during some of the talk, that there are not all words are polite and genteel, but I'm looking around that. I can see that won't bother many of you at all. And indeed, I doubt you'll be educated by those words either. They're in common use all around the north of England. So, without further ado, the poet laureate of lists, Adam Sharp. Please welcome Adam.
Thank you. I hope you can all see me. Okay, I'm sorry about being sat down. I have a bad foot at the moment, but I'll sit up tall so you can see me a little bit. Okay, before we begin, I'd like to quickly share with you some language trivia. And that is, in Hungary, if you're on stage at an event, like this one, for example, you wouldn't greet the audience by saying, "It's good to see you all," but you would instead say, "The wind blew the trash together." But seriously, welcome, and it is very good to see you all. I should warn you that this event will contain many lists. I know they're not for everyone, but I've been obsessed with them for as long as I can remember. And during the last few years, I've fallen into the very happy circumstances of getting to spend most of my time composing them for a series of books of lists. The lists are often about how a certain idiom or proverb is expressed around the world, and I'm going to share some of those with you today, all translated into and read out in English, because my spoken language skills are genuinely terrible. Although many would argue that includes English too. Oh, and final warning, the lists always count down numerically, as all lists should, whatever some misinformed people like to claim. Okay, let's get the show on the road with a list of how to say, "Let's get the show on the road," from around the world. Here we go. Number 5, in Iceland, instead of saying "let's go," you might instead say "on with the butter." Number 4, in Finland, you could say, "Let's go bedbugs, the bed's on fire." Another option from Finland, by the way, is "Let's go," said Annie Lennox. Which might seem quite random, but it's not because Annie Lennox is a huge star there or anything, although she should be, but because in Finnish, "let's go," Aku Minox rhymes with Lennox. Number 3, a way of saying "let's get this show on the road" from Chilean Spanish is "let's whip the snails." Number 2, from German, "let's saddle the chickens." And number 1, a Dutch way of saying "let's hit the road" or "let's go" is "forward with the goat." I promise I'm not kidding. Yeah, lots more of that, I'm afraid, coming. And I'll just add that another Dutch option is go with that banana. And those last two phrases might make you think that the Dutch language is overrun with absurd phrases and that it is somehow an unserious or comical language even. Well, I'm here to tell you that if you think such a thing, then you are exactly right. And I'll now show you how. So let me get to it, or as they say in Dutch, I will certainly get that piglet washed, and give you 5 more examples. Number 5, in Dutch, there's an equivalent phrase to you can't polish a turd that translates to even if the monkey wears a golden ring, it remains an ugly thing. Number 4, if you're in a situation where the truth has finally been uncovered, you wouldn't say, now the cat's out of the bag, as we might do in English, but instead you'd say, now the monkey comes out of the sleeve. If you're starting to think the Dutch language also has a bit of an obsession with monkeys, you'd again be correct. Number 3, a Dutch name for a made-up story or an urban legend is a monkey sandwich story. Just on the subject of sandwiches, not many people know this, but Salvador Dali used to own a sandwich shop. It was called Salvador Deli, and it specialised in melts. Little joke for the art appreciators there. Moving swiftly on. Number 2, an old Dutch expression about people who are always boasting about their children is everybody thinks their owl is a falcon. And I should add here that my favourite phrase about one-upmanship, not about children necessarily, but just in general, is the Irish expression, if you've been to Tenerife, he's been to 11-a-reef. Back to the Dutch list. Number 1, instead of saying I don't care or I don't give 2 hoots, in Dutch you could say it can oxidise on my anus. Or it can rust my ass is another way of expressing it. I know what you're all saying to yourselves now, and that is, please, please, Adam, tell us more ways of saying I don't care from other languages. Well, luckily for you, I happen to have such a list. It types out right here, so here we go. Number 5, a Romanian way of saying you don't give 2 hoots is I don't give a frostbitten onion. Number 4, a German equivalent is it's sausage to me. I should probably make a German sausage joke here, but to be frank, I think such jokes are the worst. Number 3, a Danish way of saying you don't give a damn is it bothers me like a cardboard duck. Side note again, there are many more animal-themed ways of saying that you aren't bothered. I won't list them all, but I'll just mention a few other favourites, which are the Yiddish, I care like a cat cares if it's Wednesday. The Hungarian, even the dog is uninterested. And the Tagalog narrate that to a tortoise. Number 2, a Finnish way of expressing antipathy is it interests me as much as a kilogram of shit. Impressively specific, that one. Number 1, in French slang, instead of saying I don't give a damn, you could say I'm painting my balls with the brush of indifference. Another colloquial French option is I slap my balls on or about it. I should point out here, though, that not all French phrases involve testicles. They have a lot more variety than that, in fact. For example, a French way to tell someone to not make such a big deal of something is don't make a whole cheese about it. If you're feeling down in the dumps, you can say, I'm sad like a meal without cheese. And a French way to tell someone to be quiet, popular on school playgrounds mostly, is shut your camembert box. But in all seriousness, there are also many French phrases that involve neither testicles nor cheese. And here are 5 of my favourites from those. Number 5, a French version of the English phrase, the early bird catches a worm, is the first cow in the meadow licks up all the dew. And if you ask me, the French phrase is a vast improvement on the English one. Little pun there for those who remember their high school French. Number 4, a French way of saying something is tip-top or the bee's knees, especially a fine wine, is it's the baby Jesus in velvet underpants. And I'll just add that an equivalent in Dutch is it's the salmon's little nose, and in Finnish it's more than 100 rabbits. And just in case you're in the mood for another cow expression, I'll add that a Chinese way of saying it's the bee's knees is it's the cow's vagina. Don't ask. Number 3, in France, someone who reads a lot is not a bookworm, but rather a library rat. I will say here, though, that my favourite French term for a bookworm is not a common or a current one, as is often the case with me, but rather it's an old one from my grandmother's region of Ard. Whenever my grandmother was talking about her daughter, Martine, my mum, who was a voracious reader, she would describe her as an ink drinker, which I think is a perfect name for a bookworm, ink drinker. Feel free to steal it. Number 2, while in English we refer to pedants as nitpickers, in France they are more commonly known as sodomizers of flies. Always have to take it a step too far. Number 1, a colloquial French version of "there are a few sandwiches short of a picnic" translates to "they're not the most oxygenated trout in the river." Let me just add another couple of French variants here, which are "they're not the penguin that slides the farthest," and returning again to a national obsession, "they have the brains of a cheese sandwich." And there are hundreds of alternatives to "a few sandwiches short of a picnic" from other languages too. And as you may have guessed, I'm now going to share a list, 5 more of them with you. Number 5, from Finnish, "they don't have all the moomins in the valley." Number 4, from Venezuelan Spanish, "intelligence is chasing them, but they are faster." Almost sounds like a compliment at first, that one, but it definitely isn't. Number 3, from Persian, "their head is taking penalties against their arse." Number 2, from Korean, "is your head a decoration?" And speaking of insults that suggest someone's head is empty or almost empty, I should say that in 1949, in a parliamentary session in New Zealand, one member said of another member that his brains could revolve inside a peanut shell for 1,000 years and never touch the sides. I'll also add here that there's a Kenyan proverb that can be used when someone is being loudly ignorant that goes, "unlike the stomach, the brain does not alert you when empty." And number 1, a Swedish version of "a few sandwiches short of a picnic" is "the wheel is spinning, but the hamster is dead." "The wheel is spinning, but the hamster is dead" is also the title of my latest book. As you know already, because you all own a copy, if for some inexplicable reason you don't already own a copy, or you just want extra copies, don't worry, because it is for sale here today. And thanks to Fox Lane Books for that. And while "the wheel is spinning but the hamster is dead" is my all-time favourite phrase about hamsters, I should give an honourable mention to my second favourite, which is a German exclamation of surprise that translates to "I think my hamster is waxing the floor." And "I think my hamster is waxing the floor" is one of many great German phrases, which is one of my favourite languages, in fact. So, let me now share with you a list of 5 German phrases. Number 5, in German, a way of saying nothing lasts forever. like this event, sadly, is everything has an end except a sausage, which has two. There are also countless other phrases about sausages. German language has quite the preoccupation with them. But I'll just mention a couple of other favourites, which are sausage is good when it's long, speech is good when it's short, for telling someone to be quiet, and stop playing the offended liver sausage, for telling someone to stop sulking. Number 4, a German version of let me give you my opinion, or these are my 2 cents, translates to I would like to add my mustard. No direct mention of a sausage in that one, but it is still implied. In this country, of course, an old expression for giving your opinion is let me give my tuppence worth. Although when you want someone else's opinion, you say a penny for your thoughts. This suggests English people consider their own opinions twice as valuable as those of others, which perhaps explains a lot about where we are today. A little bit of political commentary for you there. Number 3, a German version of you're getting on my nerves translates to you're getting on my cookie. And speaking of cookies, I should mention a few of my other favourite biscuit-themed expressions. An Armenian version of you're stretching the truth, which translates to you've wandered into the cookie forest. A Dutch way of saying a taste of your own medicine that translates to a biscuit of your own dough. And a Brazilian phrase to describe someone who is boastful and or conceited that translates to he thinks he's the last biscuit in the bag. And while we're on the subject of people with an overly high opinion of themselves, let me just mention some other phrases to describe them from elsewhere. In Ireland, there's if he was chocolate, he'd eat himself. In Zulu, there's he enjoys being looked at like a long-haired goat. Who doesn't? And my favourite colloquial expression from Scotland is he thinks he's the cheese, but he's only the stink. There's also a trend in Argentinian slang of describing someone with an overly high opinion of themselves as a powerful fictional character, but of a tiny territory. Examples include Yeti of the fridge freezer, Aquaman of the toilet bowl, and Tarzan of the flower pot. And speaking of Tarzan, my favourite Spanish phrase about someone who is very idle is he's as lazy as Tarzan's tailor. Right, sorry about the digressing there. Back to the German list. Number 2, if you were feeling very happy, in English you could say I'm on cloud 9, whereas in German you might instead say I feel pudelwell. And again, while we're on that subject, I'll just mention a couple of other phrases about happiness, which is the Polish version of grinning like a Cheshire cat that translates to smiling like an idiot to his cheese, and the Persian phrase for feeling cock-a-hoop that translates to I have a wedding party up my butt. Again, I digress. Back to the German list. Number 1, a German way of saying life is hard or unfair is life is not a pony farm. Another similar phrase in German is life is not honey licking. And this is sometimes combined with the life is not a pony farm expression to get life is not pony licking. Don't let anybody ever tell you Germans don't have a sense of humour. Right, before you start begging for more international variants of life is hard, let me allow you to keep your dignity by volunteering a list of 5 more of them. So selfless of me. Here we go. Number 5, a Flemish way of saying life isn't a bed of roses is life is not an ice cream van. Number 4, in Russian, you might say life is not a field to cross. I love that the Russian idea of a fantasy luxury life is crossing the field. Number 3, a Polish way of saying that life is hard is life is not a fairy tale. It doesn't stroke your balls. By the way, that phrase in the original Polish rhymes, but I'm not going to attempt to say it out loud here because, as I mentioned earlier, my spoken language skills need some polishing. Polishing, perhaps. Moving on. Number 2, a Brazilian way of saying life is hard is want softness, sit on a flan. And number 1, a Finnish way of expressing the idea that life can be hard or cruel or unjust is the gummy bears are not always evenly divided. So true, Finland, so true. You might now be thinking that the Finnish language, like Dutch, is kooky and whimsical, absurdly so even, and you'd again be correct. And to illustrate, here are 5 more examples from Finland, as always, in translation, because my quest to master spoken languages is far from being finished. You can boo me if you want. Don't encourage me. Here we go. Number 5. A Finnish way of telling someone to go away or get lost is go ski into a spruce. There's also a much ruder version, which I'm not going to share with you. Number 4. In English, someone who sits in the living room all day watching TV would be called a couch potato, whereas in Finnish, they're more likely to be called a house mouse. And one more side note, some other colourful terms for a homebody are the Flemish armchair fungus, the Chilean Spanish sofa turd, and an old Irish term about someone never wanting to leave the comfort and warmth of the fireplace that could be translated as divine hag of the ashes, which is a good name for a couch potato, but possibly an even better title for a death metal album. Anyway, back to Finland. Number 3, a Finnish exclamation of surprise, similar to OMG, I guess, is chicken cage of terror. Number 2, an unspecified or long ago time can be referred to in Finnish as in the year of sausage and mashed potatoes. And I'll just add here a few of my other favourite phrases from elsewhere, which are the Icelandic in 1700 and sauerkraut, the Brazilian when my grandma wore short shorts, and the Australian back when Jesus played fullback for Jerusalem. Number 1, a Finnish euphemism for vomiting or throwing up is to speak Norwegian. Don't worry about the Norwegians though, for they give it out plenty too. For example, a Norwegian way of saying someone looks like a fish out of water is they're like a Dane on skis. And a Norwegian way of describing someone sneaking out of a party without saying farewell is to make a Swede of oneself. And on that subject, here are 5 more ways of describing sneaking out of an event without saying farewell. Number 5, here in England, back in the day anyway, we might call it taking French leave. Number 4, in France they describe it as leaving English style. Number 3, an old German phrase for sneaking out of saying bye is to do a Polish exit. Number 2, in the US they often call it giving an Irish goodbye. And number 1, in Turkey, you could say they departed like a rich person. Okay, maybe it's time we have a quick break soon, and I hope none of you do a Polish exit or depart like a rich person during it. We're going to have the break, which will be for roughly 6 minutes and 34 seconds, so that you can have a go at an entirely voluntary, but hopefully fun, writing contest. With the winner getting copies of both of my books. The most recent one, The Wheel is Spinning but the Hamster is Dead, and the previous one, The Correct Order of Biscuits, which, by the way, is also still available in all good bookshops, and some evil ones too. The contest is to see who can come up with the best curse for your worst enemy. To first give you an idea of just how chilling curses can be, I'll now read you out a list of 5 of the most savage curses I've come across from around the world. Number 5, a Serbian curse is, may your wife give birth to a centipede, so you spend your life working for shoes. Centipede shoes are, of course, notoriously expensive. Number 4, a curse from the ever-colourful Turkish language is, may the bow of a violin enter your anus. Number 3, a biblical Bosnian curse is, let it be the will of God that you shit yourself. Poop curses aren't my favourite type of curses, but they are a solid. Number 2, probably the most well-known Irish curse is, may the cat eat you and may the devil eat the cat. But if you're looking for a rarer gem, let me suggest the incredibly harsh, may your obituary be written in weasel's piss. There's one more that is even harsher still, however, and that one goes, may the devil use your backbone as a ladder to pick apples in the garden of hell. Yikes. If you thought the last curse was brutal, please brace yourself for this one. From Slovenia, which goes as follows, I hope your tractor breaks. You might be thinking, what are you talking about? That sounds harmless. But to give you a better idea of just how malicious that last curse is, let me say that tractors are a significant part of life in Slovenia. To illustrate, for every 10,000 people, there are 6 tractors in China. For every 10,000 people in India, there are 14 tractors. In South Africa, it is 16. In Mexico, it is 18. In Slovenia, it is 574. Anyway, back to the curse writing contest. I should add that your own curses don't have to be terrifying if you don't want. In fact, the very mild ones can be fun too. For example, here is a list of some first world curses that I came up with, and we'll read out for you now, just to set the bar encouragingly low for you. Number 5, may you have more clothes than hangers. Number 4, may your boxes of Quality Street never have any purple ones in it. Everyone knows the purple ones are the only good ones. And don't hate me, but I'd argue even those aren't that great. Quality Street, meh. I think I just lost my shot at a corporate sponsorship from Nestle there. Oh well, I'm holding out for Lindt anyway. Right, back to the curses. What's written down here? Number 3, may you never receive a corporate sponsorship from Lindt. Oh, brutal. Number 2, this one isn't mine actually. This was the winning entry of a previous contest, which is why it's actually good. May the available petrol pump always be on the wrong side for your car. And number 1, may your country of origin never be the first option in the drop-down box. You know when you fill out those online forms, and sometimes you have to scroll down a bit to find your nationality. Wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Right, there are slips of pens and paper dotted around on your chairs even. Feel free to write your best curse, brutal or mild, on one of the slips of paper, and pop it into the little cardboard box here before the end of the break. Oh, sorry, yes. If you pass it to the end of the row, the box will be coming round. There you go. Thank you. Yes. And at the end of the hour, I'll read out the top 5, and the winner will get all of these books. Okay. I'll see you in 6 or 7 minutes. Welcome back. Now, at the start of the hour, I told you all about the Hungarian way of saying it's good to see you all, which is the wind blew the trash together. And I'm a bit worried I've contributed to the stereotype that the Hungarian language is always blunt, vulgar even. So let me now read you out a list of 5 Hungarian phrases that will convince you of just how gentle and poetic the Hungarian language can be. Number 5, a Hungarian expression that can be used to comment on someone's singing translates to, "Your voice is erotic. It fucks my ears." Number 4, a Hungarian expression that can be used to comment on someone's appearance is, "If you went down a mine, the coal would come up by itself." Number 3, a Hungarian expression that can be used to comment on someone's intellect is, "Mentally, you are a sock." Number 2, a Hungarian equivalent to "I smell a rat," used of course when something seems wrong or suspicious, is, "There's shit in the pancake." And number 1, in Hungary, you wouldn't use the phrase, "A bad workman blames his tools," but would instead say, "If the duck can't swim, it's not the water that's stupid." What I did there, I'm sure you noticed, was promise I was going to read you a list of phrases to prove Hungarian isn't always blunt or vulgar, and then proceeded to read out a list of the most blunt and vulgar phrases imaginable, which is what they call misdirection. And that's all well and good, but probably not fair on the Hungarian language, as I really have given a bad impression of it now. So, to put that right, let me share with you a couple of genuinely non-vulgar or blunt phrases. First, there's a lovely way of saying good night in Hungary, often said to children at bedtime, and it translates to, "I'm putting myself away until tomorrow." Exactly. And speaking of cute phrases for children, Hungarians don't ask little children, "Why are you crying?" Instead, they say, "Why are you giving drinks to the mice?" Correct response, again, some fine audiencing work right there. As a side note, there's also a poetic Mexican phrase said to children who are crying a lot, which is, "The colour is going to wash away from your eyes." Now you're just showing off. And speaking of Mexico, I lived there for a little while. Not that you'd know it from my abysmal Spanish, but let me at least share with you some of my favourite Mexican phrases in translation. Number 5, a Mexican phrase about daydreaming or being away with the fairies is "pondering the immortality of the crab." Number 4, in Mexico, the name for someone who is always going to parties, or a social butterfly as we'd call them, translates to "little dog of all weddings." And speaking of weddings, I'll just add that in French, a touching expression for getting married is to put the noose around one's neck. Don't let anyone tell you that French isn't the language of love. And as we're on the subject of getting married, I know what you're all thinking now, and that is, "Adam, why aren't you married? How can someone so wonderful, probably, in our opinion, the greatest human that ever lived, not be snapped up?" Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment. You really are too kind, everyone. Second of all, it's a bit of a personal question, isn't it? I think you might be out of order there, to be honest. However, you have been a great audience so far. And I hope it's not just me, but I feel like we've really bonded. So, I'm going to open up about it, just to you. Right, as doing lists is my thing, how about I share with you the basic details of 5 people that I've dated and what went wrong. And then we really must get back to the international idioms. Okay, I can't believe I'm about to reveal so much personal information. Number 5, I once dated a fellow historian, but there was no future in it. Number 4, I once dated a matador, but there were too many red flags. Number 3, believe it or not, I also once dated a ventriloquist's dummy, but it turned out they were spoken for. Number 2, this still brings a tear to my eye. I once courted a proctologist, but she gave me the finger. And number 1, this one really did break my heart. I once dated a cocky lion tamer, but in the end, he was consumed by his own pride. Right, if we're done with all the probing questions, let's get back to the Mexican list, shall we? Where were we? Okay, here we go. Number 3. In English, we usually call the practice of each person covering their own expenses at a restaurant going Dutch. But in Mexico, it is known as American style. And I'll add that in Vietnam, it is called the Cambodian way. In Spain, paying like Catalans. And in Turkey, paying the bill the German way. Well, my favourite phrase for this practice is the Guatemalan, by the law of Christ, each one with his own stew. Anyway, again, back to the Mexican list. Number 2, if someone is standing in front of a TV and blocking the view, an English dad might say to them, "You make a better door than a window." But a Mexican dad is more likely to say, "Donkey meat is not transparent." Unnecessarily harsh, if you ask me. On donkeys, that is. Number 1, speaking of dads, a phrase often used by Mexican dads when one of their children walk into the house and leave the front door open is, "Did you come with a mariachi band?" Obviously, you'll all now want to know what other dads around the world say when their children leave the door open. And as I never want to disappoint you, I'll read out this list of 5 of the best ones that I've heard. Number 5, from Norwegian, "Are you waiting for your dog?" Number 4, from Lithuanian, "Were you born on a trolleybus?" Trolleybuses, of course, don't have doors. Number 3, from Italian, "Are we at the Colosseum?" Colosseum famously also doesn't have doors. Number 2, from Romanian, "Don't you have a rock for your cave?" And number 1, from Polish, "Did a goat eat the door?" What was that? You want yet more international dad phrases? Wow. Please don't take this the wrong way, but you sure are a demanding crowd. But as it happens, I have a list typed out again. What a happy coincidence. So here's one more list of dad phrases, this time for when the lights have been left on. Number 5, here in the north of England, a dad might say, "It's like the Blackpool illuminations in here." At least that was a favourite with my Lancashire granddad, who I was raised by. Number 4, from Hindi, "Is it Diwali again?" Diwali, of course, involves quite a few lights. Number 3, from Croatian, "Are we living in Bethlehem?" Number 2, from French, "We're not in Versailles." And number 1, from Serbian, "Was your grandpa Nikola Tesla?" Nikola Tesla, who was, of course, famous for always leaving the lights on. By the way, that phrase is one of my favourite ever Serbian phrases, probably second only to a Serbian variant of "a storm in a teacup" that translates to "the mountain shook, a mouse was born." And I should add that there's also a great Korean expression for someone making a fuss about very little that goes, "to see a mosquito and draw a sword." And speaking of Korean, it's another language with countless colourful expressions. So it would be rude of me not to share a list of 5 more of them with you again. In translation, of course, because revealing just how bad my spoken skills are would be terrible for my professional reputation. You could even say it would be career suicide. I regret nothing. Okay, 5 Korean expressions. Here we go. Number 5, a Korean version of "speak of the devil and he shall appear" translates to, Even the tiger comes when you talk about it. And let me add that my favourite Swedish version of Speak of the Devil is, when you speak of the trolls, they stand in the entrance hall. Lovely image, that one. Number 4, a Korean phrase that can be directed at a chatterbox is, you would talk to the birds if your lips were pointy. I should also mention here my favourite German phrase about a chatterbox, which is, when this person dies, we'll have to kill the mouth separately. Number 3, in Korean, someone who tries their hand at many different things is not a jack of all trades, but is instead known as an 8-direction beauty. And I must add here, my favourite Lithuanian version of jack of all trades is Barbie 9 jobs. Number 2, a Korean version of Once Upon a Time, often said at the start of folk and fairy tales, is back when tigers smoked pipes. One more side note, my all-time favourite Once Upon a Time equivalent is from German again, and it goes, in the old times when wishing still helped. Back to the Korean list. Number 1, a Korean variant of killing 2 birds with 1 stone translates to, she both picked mulberries and saw her lover. By the way, I think that phrase could also work well in the form of, you want to have your cake and eat it, as in, you want to both pick mulberries and see your lover. And speaking of having your cake and eating it, I'd have to say that to me, it's one of the most fascinating English proverbs. First of all, because I love anything that mentions cake. Secondly, I love how nonsensical it sounds in its current form, because of course you can have your cake and eat it. That's the point, even. But originally, the more popular way of phrasing that proverb was, you can't eat your cake and still have it, which makes much more sense. And on that note, I should also mention that the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, was identified by the FBI, partly because in both his manifesto and his personal letters, he used the rare version, the old rare version, you can't eat your cake and have it, rather than the original, the new modern version, you can't have your cake and eat it. It's one of the few proverbs involved in stopping a major crime spree. Speaking of crimes, not many people know this, but in the book version of Forrest Gump, there's a scene where Forrest Gump gets lost while kayaking on the Alabama River. And one night he starts a fire for warmth, which of course results in the boat burning and starting to sink. And it's at that point he realizes you really can't have your kayak and heat it. I did tell you a crime was about to happen. Finally, you can't have your cake and eat it has many international equivalents, and of course, I'll now share with you a list of 5 of them. Number 5, in Hungarian, you could say, there's no such thing as a well-fed goat and remaining cabbage. I should add another Hungarian option here, which is, you can't sit on 2 horses with 1 arse. Number 4, my favourite Spanish variant is, you can't be at Mass and in the tower ringing the bells. Number 3, a version from Russian is, you want to eat fish and sit on a dick. Yeah. You might think that the phrase, so vulgar, comes from some place of ill repute, like Twitter, say. But its origin is actually literary, as it comes from a letter by Alexander Pushkin. True story. Number 2, in French they have, you want to have the butter, the money from having sold the butter, and a smile from the milkmaid. Again, there's a much ruder variant of that expression, but I think we've had quite enough vulgarity for one list. Number 1, A Tamil equivalent of you can't have your cake and eat it translates to you want to have the mustache and drink porridge. And speaking of porridge, a Finnish way of saying someone is beating around the bush is you're prancing like a cat around hot porridge. A Dutch term for a wimp or a coward is a porridge kid. And a Zulu way of telling someone to mind their own business is that porridge wasn't made for you, which is actually one of many great ways of telling someone to mind their beeswax, including the French, deal with your own onions, the Arabic, unload your own donkey, and the Lithuanian, not your pigs, not your beans. And I know what you're all thinking now, which is not your pigs, not your beans. Sounds quite similar to not my circus, not my monkeys. Everyone's favourite Polish expression for minding your own business. And I like it too, not my circus, not my monkeys. Or rather, I used to. But because I'm such an annoying hipster, I like it a lot less since it became so widely known and popular. You can even get t-shirts with that phrase on it now. So, let me introduce you to a lesser-known version, in this country anyway, from Chinese slang. So, in 2007, a man was stopped in the street just outside a shop by a Guangzhou TV reporter. The man was asked about a sex scandal that was all over the news at the time, and his response has been a popular Chinese slang phrase for not getting involved ever since. The man said, "I'm just here to buy soy sauce." Just before we move on from this subject, I'll mention a couple more ways of telling someone to not get involved from South America. In Argentina, you could say, "Don't comb your hair because you don't appear in this photograph." And in Venezuela, you might say, "You have no dead in this funeral," which is one of my favourite Venezuelan phrases, second only to a Venezuelan version of all talk and no action, used, of course, to describe someone who doesn't back up their claims, that translates to all bubble gum but little popping. Now, once again, I've anticipated what you would all want here, which is 5 more variants of all talk and no action. So I made this list for you especially. You're welcome. Number 5, the best variant of all talk and no action I know from US English, originates from Texas, and it goes, all hat and no cattle. Number 4, my favourite version from Australian English was said by former Prime Minister Paul Keating, who described then Treasurer Peter Costello as all tip and no iceberg. Number 3, the best variant I've come across from UK English, by far, is all wardrobe and no Narnia. Thanks to Twitter for that one. Number 2, a colloquial expression from Berlin dialect is no hair on your head, but a comb in your pocket. And my favourite Chinese way of saying all talk and no action translates to the thunder is loud, but the rain is light. By this point in the show, very near to the end, I'm sure it will come as no shock whatsoever that I'm now going to read you out a list of 5 more Chinese phrases to follow on from that last Chinese phrase, because I'm nothing if not diligent when it comes to making sure all the lists connect nicely for you. So, most of these expressions exist in multiple dialects, in which case I'll just attribute them as Chinese generally, and 1 or 2 are specifically from Mandarin. Okay, 5 more Chinese expressions. Here we go. Number 5. In Chinese, a placeholder name for an average or typical man is not Joe Bloggs, but is instead Wang number 5. And I shall quickly share with you here some other Joe Bloggs equivalents. In Slovakia, they have Joe Little Carrot. In Sweden, they have Average Svensson. In Germany, Otto Normal Consumer. And in Poland, the typical man is not Joe Bloggs, but the much more fun, if harder to say, for me anyway, statistical Kowalski. I managed it just. Number 4, in China, you don't tell someone their fly or zipper is undone, but instead say, the gate of heavenly peace is open. Another side note, my favourite Spanish expression about having your zipper undone is the pharmacy is open and the doctor asleep. Number 3, in Mandarin, you don't call the hairstyle when someone brushes strands of hair over a bald spot a comb-over, but instead use the expression, the localities support the central government. Just as a footnote to that one, in French they describe a comb-over as bringing the suburbs to the town centre. And my favourite Swedish name for a comb-over is a Robin Hood hairstyle, because it takes from the rich and gives to the poor. Number 2, a Chinese version of a leopard never changes its spots, translates to a dog cannot get out of the habit of eating shit. And by the way, a Spanish version is born a piglet, die a pig. And I'll also add that the Japanese way of expressing the idea that people never change is death is the only remedy for stupidity. And number 1, a Chinese curse for someone who has wronged you greatly by the sounds of it is, may your future child be born without a butthole. And speaking of curses, I think it's now time I read out your best curses. Oh, very well done, Sue, making it through in time. Thank you. Okay, this is my favourite bit. Okay, this is your top 5. So this is like a collaborative list we're doing, really. Number 5. May your dash to the toilet always be 12 seconds too late. Number 4. Oh, brutal. May your teenager only wake up early on a bank holiday Monday. Number 3, may you never find the end of the sellotape. This is possibly my favourite. May your Festival of Ideas lecturer be trying to sell you 2 books. It'll be $3 next year, so be warned. And number 1, and the winner of both of these books, which, by the way, did I mention are still available, all good bookshops, and after this event. Okay, number 1, and the winner. May every meeting start with a quick icebreaker. Whose is that on? Congratulations. I'll bring you the books at the end. Yeah. Okay, that's almost it. Thanks to everyone who entered, by the way. And thanks to Sue for being the guest judge. Very good job. And thank you all for coming along today. Thanks also to Festival of Ideas for having me. And thanks to Fox Lane Books for making available copies of both of my books. Did I mention that Correct Order biscuits are really spinning, but the hamster is dead? You can buy them here, and I'll happily sign them for you afterwards, in list form, no less. I'll also, if you like, write your curse as the inscription in the book. Just let me know if you'd like to do that. Okay. I'm going to do one last list, which is how something is brought to an end in other languages. Number 5, in Norwegian, they don't end a story with, and they all lived happily ever after, but instead say, snip, snap, snout, this tale's told out. Number 4, in Flemish, they say, then along came a pig with a long nose, and the story was over. Number 3, from Icelandic, the cat in the veil lost its tail, end of fairy tale. Number 2, a Bengali story closer is, here the story ends, and the spinach is eaten by the goat. And number 1, from German, flap shut, monkey is dead. I really am going to finish now, but I'm going to leave you with my favourite blessing from Indigenous Australian, and it goes, may the wombat of happiness snuffle through your underbrush. Thank you, everyone.
Adam, thank you so very, very much. That was hugely entertaining. I'm glad I don't wear makeup anymore because it would have run down my face. Thank you very much indeed for one of the best Saturday mornings in years. The books are there. You're willing to sign. So, and don't forget, in case you did miss it, there are 2 books. There are 2 books there. Finally, please thank Adam once more for an extraordinary, entertaining morning.